After cutting his teeth in stand-up comedy, actor Jason Sudeikis got his big break when he joined the cast of Saturday Night Live. Jason has seamlessly transitioned to the big screen and continues to make his mark in film and television. He works and lives in New York City.
I consider myself an honorary New Yorker in the sense that I've been to a Yankees game. I like big pieces of pizza. And I have a subway card. But I'm mostly from the Midwest. I was raised in Overland Park, Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City. My parents are Dan and Kathy, Dan being my father, Kathy being my mom. On my mom's side, there's a lot of information accessible, but then, yeah, Sudeikis side, nothing. Stanley Sedakus, my father's father, died, so we have been told, when my dad was 2 years old. And that's all I know. That's it. Don't know how, don't know where. Don't know what happened or, you know, how that affected my gram and obviously my dad. My dad's mom, Edna, she lived with us ever since I can remember. She was a big part of all of our lives. She was tough, but I tell you what, bless her heart, if Dad was out and Mom was traveling, then Gram was running the show. I'm at a point in my life where looking backwards, realizing that my dad raised me without having been raised by a dad. And to think that he was deprived of that is like, you know, my heart really goes out to him about that. That's tough. I unfortunately didn't go through the same thing. I got him. The thing I'm most curious about is to find out what happened to my father's father. So now I'm heading to my hometown, Overland Park, Kansas, to meet with my parents, Kathy and Dan. I'm hoping my dad has some stories or photos or just any information that can help me investigate the background of my grandfather, Stanley. Hello.
Hey, Chase, how you doing?
Hey, honey.
Hi.
You. Oh, welcome home.
Good to be home.
We've got some fun things to share with you here, Jason. I think you'll enjoy.
All right.
Going down memory lane.
It's not my bill from growing up.
Dad had that prepared earlier,
I like
yeah.
that.
Okay.
This is good.
There we go.
Here we
There's
go.
Graham.
That's Graham in all of her glory.
I remember this hat of your grandmother's, so.
How can you forget it? That's great.
A single mother with 2 kids at her age was really kind of interesting. She was very self-sustaining. She was very independent.
And then her being a strong, presence.
I think it's because she was a single parent
Right.
her whole life, so she was playing both roles.
Yeah. What do you know at this point about your dad?
Not much more than I did when I was younger.
You don't remember him at all?
Oh, not at all.
Yeah.
No, absolutely nothing at all.
Well, Dan, did you ever ask your mom about your dad? And
We used to ask them, we'd say, well, what was he like or what did he look like? She got very specific. He was 6'2" and a half and weighed 195. He said, well, when did he die? How did he die? And she used to tell us one story that's always stood out because it's the only story she ever told. He was leaving Mass one day, fell down, it was winter, icy, and he slipped on the stairs, broke his neck. He died on the church steps of a parish in Chicago.
That's interesting.
And it may be true for all I know, but it was all this cloak of mystery. I mean, you know nothing about his parents. I didn't know where he was born.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to, obviously we got to go to Chicago, Illinois. With your permission, of course.
Oh, absolutely. Anything goes.
I'm intrigued. Good luck, honey. Godspeed.
So now I'm heading to Chicago where I'm, hoping to unravel the mystery around my grandfather's death. My first stop is meeting with Jean Bloom, a genealogist who I've asked to pull any records she can find regarding my grandfather, Stanley Sedakus.
So I pulled the coroner's certificate of death.
Right. So Stanley Sedakus.
And your grandfather died in Cook County Hospital.
He was 32 years old. Is that right? Yeah. Manner of injury, death, skull fracture, fall on sidewalk, accident. That was always the story that my grandmother would tell my father, that he was walking out of church and slipped on the stairs and fell and broke his neck. Now, he didn't break his neck. It was actually skull fracture, but that's pretty close.
We don't know from this where it was.
Yeah.
Or if it was a church.
Right. Okay, so birth date, born May 26, 1915, which I don't think my father knew. It has listed Stanley's parents, my great-grandparents. We have Stanley Sedakus, his mom's name, Emma Bielskis, and it says birthplace on both of them, unknown specifically, but they do have Lithuania, which makes me definitely Lithuanian. So that's a whole bunch of new foods I'm gonna have to try. Well, you know. Usual occupation, unknown. Industry or business, unknown. Informant, Anne, is that Pinkel or Pukel?
Pukel, P-U-K-E-L.
Yeah. How is it not, like, you know, my grandma? How is she not the informant on this?
Jason Sudeikis is in Chicago, researching the cryptic story of his grandfather Stanley's demise. He just found out that his late grandfather's body was identified by a mystery woman, not his grandmother Edna.
If you look up here, here is the residence of Stanley.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah, it's the same address as Miss Ann Pukel. Yeah. So he was living with Miss Pukel, or at least living in the same place.
And on this type of death certificate, it doesn't say what the relationship is.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a Pollyanna, but, you know.
What we do know is that the coroner was brought in because it was an accident. What that meant was there was a jury that was put together.
Okay.
And they hear the testimony about what went on.
It's a full-on investigation.
It's an investigation. That file should be at the medical examiner's office, and I can meet you with that file tomorrow.
Yeah, because there is a mystery here as to why the informant's name is not, you know, Edna Sedakus, his wife. So while Gene is looking for the coroner's report, I'm gonna go meet with Phil Costello from the Circuit Court Archives. Phil has pulled any court records naming my grandparents, Stanley and Edna, that I'm hoping, in some way will shed some light on their relationship and possibly explain why Stanley was apparently living with another woman.
Let's take a look here.
All right, at the bat, we got the plaintiff is Edna Sedakus, my grandmother, versus Stanley P. Sedakus, my grandfather. Entered May 15th, 1947, a year before he died.
Up here, it's a decree for separate maintenance.
What does that mean? Decree for separate maintenance?
Well, it's not really a divorce case.
It isn't.
They're not asking for a judge to break the bonds of matrimony and to dissolve the marriage.
Right.
They're asking a judge to enter an order to allow these two parties to live apart and separate.
Why does that happen?
Based on my experience, were these people Catholic?
I mean, I would assume, yeah. I mean, that's the way we were raised. So,
back in this era in the 1940s, certain judges didn't want to grant a divorce because of the Catholic Church.
Right.
I'm thinking that because of the religion angle,
yeah,
the divorce was forbidden.
The parties hereto were lawfully joined in marriage on September 25th, 1945. That subsequently to their intermarriage, the defendant willfully deserted and absented himself from the plaintiff without any reasonable cause onto wit, so it's saying September 25th, 1945.
I think the big thing is that the date of the marriage was the date of the desertion.
Which is, it's odd.
It is odd. And maybe it was kind of like a shotgun wedding, if you will,
right,
that they joined together in a marriage and maybe it was prearranged that they would have that as legitimizing their children.
Right.
So this is the testimony that Edna presented in court as to why she should be granted separate maintenance.
Okay. Examination. Please state your name and address. Edna Sedakus. So these are her words here that I'm reading?
That's correct.
That's pretty
cool.
And
this is her attorney, Mr. Brennan, asking her questions in front of the judge.
You are married to the defendant, Stanley P. Sedakus, yes. Were there any children born to you and Stanley? Yes, 2 children. What is the name and age of the older child? Anne Louise, 2 years old. Name and age of the younger child? Daniel, 1 year old. That's for my father. Are you living with your husband now? No. On or about what date did you separate? September 25th, 1945. Have you lived separate and apart since that date as a single woman? Yes. Has he since that date furnished you or your children with a home? No. Did he offer to do so? No. Since that date, has he furnished you and your children with money for support? No. Where are you and the children now living? With my father. She's living with her dad. Wow. Okay. All right, did you ever give your husband reason to absent himself from you? Her answer, no. The children are in your custody? Yes. When is the last time your husband saw the children? About 1.5 years ago. He has not seen the last child? No. So he never even met my dad.
Not according to the court record.
Up to this point.
That's right.
That's heavy duty. I mean, it feels like if it's not surprising if she's asking for the separation, assuming that she didn't let him see the children.
That's true.
But then also given his actions here, it's also not surprising that maybe he didn't make the effort either. What does the husband earn? He refuses to work. All right. He refuses to work. I mean, the way my grandmother would describe it, that he was 6'2.5" and 195 pounds.
Yeah.
And that's like, you know, I wish I was 6'2", 195. Yeah. And he,
There's plenty of work to go around at that era.
Yeah. Not seeing anything like this, you know, ever in my life, much less it being my own life. You know, it seems pretty cut and dry, and yet it's still an unusual case. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that my grandmother shielding my father from the true story had more to do with not speaking of things that wouldn't have benefited anybody to speak of. My grandfather doesn't seem to be all that much of a stand-up fella, which obviously being a gentleman is not necessarily hereditary, because I think my dad is incredibly responsible and loyal. I'm curious what led to this abandonment. He continues to be a mystery at this point, and a much more interesting mystery than we had thought.
Jason Sudeikis is in Chicago, having just learned that his grandfather Stanley abandoned Jason's father. Jason is meeting again with genealogist Jean Bloom.
Jean's found a coroner's inquest, which I'm hoping will give me more details about my grandfather's premature death. I'm also curious to see if the inquest will tell me about this Ann Pukel, the woman Stanley seemed to be living with at the same time as his death. You know, who was she to him? Jean wanted me to meet her at the corner of 50th and Honore, and I'm not sure why.
This is the scene of the accident.
It is. Wow. It's still a church.
It is. And this is the inquest report.
Okay.
There's a lot of details and personal information in here. That's something you'll want to read by yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Cause of accident or catastrophe, fall on sidewalk. Place of accident, Honore and 50th Street. Cause of death, a skull fracture with cerebral lacerations. All right, looks like I have here the sworn testimony of Ann Pukel. How are you related to Stanley Sedakus? My cousin. Okay. So that's good. That's better than other alternatives, assumptions I had made about Miss Pukel. When did you last see your cousin alive? She says, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. He came for a shirt. How was he at that time, would you say, mentally, physically, and so forth? Well, most of the time he was under the influence of liquor. He wasn't staggering that time. The officer that found Stanley, this is his testimony, there were some cement steps to a church, and it was possible that the man was intoxicated and stumbled and hit his head on the steps. We contacted his wife, and we asked her to attend the inquest, and she stated that she wanted nothing to do with it, that she had been legally separated for 3 years. There's no evidence as to how many times she had to forgive him. It certainly sounds like my grandmother had had enough. Talked to a man that said he was his uncle. He said that he did not want him and to take him anyplace. All right. So it's a family condition to not uphold familial responsibilities. Were there any signs that there had been attacked, assaulted, robbed, or anything? No signs. Were there any valuables? No, he had nothing at all. He said he was going to sleep in the park. Yeah. My grandfather was more or less homeless, sleeping outside. It's sad. At 10:05 yesterday, one Stanley Sedakus passed away at the county hospital. I don't know where he felt at home. You know, it seems like his own family wasn't keen on helping him out. I would assume the habit of drinking had made him someone that was difficult to rely on, to count on, and to know that helping even in the small doses, whether it be financially or just a bed to sleep in, wouldn't be worth it to people at that point. He went from being, you know, a guy making bad decisions consciously to today you sort of realize, oh, he was in bad shape. It makes me feel, you know, sorry for him more than angry at him. And my father would speak towards it. You know, he drank a lot and just stopped one day. So it didn't surprise me. And all this makes me wonder what kind of relationship Stanley Jr. had with his dad. You know, I'd like to know more about Stanley's childhood and his parents and, you know, the whole Sudeikis line. So Gene recommended I meet with another genealogist named Hilary Mack Austin.
Okay, so you were interested in finding more information about your grandfather.
Yeah.
So what we found was a marriage record for your great-grandfather.
Okay. Also named Stanley Sedakus. The age of 22 years old, and Miss Michalina, am I saying that right?
Yeah,
Michalina. I believe this is like Bielskis, which we'd seen this name before.
Yes.
Now we knew her as Emma.
Well, I think people change their names.
Sure.
Americanize their names.
Right.
And so I think that's probably what happened in this situation.
She was ahead of her time. Emma's a very popular name these days. Yeah. This was the 11th, August, 1914, and there's his signature. I guess Stanley Sr. and Emma have at least my grandfather. I wonder if they had any other kids.
Well, this is 1914, so I think that the next place to look is in the census and go to 1920 and see what's happening with the family.
Right.
If we can go to Ancestry.com.
Sure.
Go down to Census and Voter Lists.
Yep.
We are looking for the 1920 census.
Bingo. Stanley. Location?
Location.
Chicago Cook, Illinois, USA. Bingo. So, here we go. All right, so we have 3 people listed on this address. Emma Sudeikis, another common misspelling. And then we have a son, Stanley.
Yeah.
He's 4.5 at this point. Walter. Here's a Walter, Bill Key. So he's the head of the household. Emma is a sister. Okay, so Walter is Stanley's uncle.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Where's Stanley Sr.? She listed as married? She is listed as...
She's listed as married. She's not listed as widowed.
Right. There's no Stanley Sr. listed here at all. Interesting. Maybe they divorced. Where do you think we could find where Stanley Sr. would be?
We go back to the census.
Okay.
Go to edit
search. Wonderful.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah, take both of those out.
Oh, both.
Yeah.
Okay.
And go right
View
there.
the original record. It's the 1920 census. Population of Bridgeport City. So it's Connecticut? Yeah, Bridgeport, Connecticut. Okay, so now here's a Stanley Sedakus with a misspelling, and his wife barely can read that.
I think it might be Mill.
Yeah, so this is 1920. Well then, so he had two? He had 2 families?
Jason Sudeikis is in Chicago, having just uncovered documents suggesting that his great-grandfather, Stanley Sr., may have been married to 2 women at the same time.
He had 2 families?
It looks like he might have. I mean, it's not as though there are a lot of Stanley Sedakuses listed, and it's Lithuania.
Right. So in 1920, my grandfather, Stanley Jr., lived in Chicago with my great-grandmother, Emma, but for some reason, my great-grandfather, Stanley Sr., was not living with them. Now, the crazy thing is, I've also found a 1920 census from Connecticut that shows a man named Stanley Sedakus living in Bridgeport with a woman named Mill. Now, is the Stanley Sedakus in Connecticut the same man as my great-grandfather, Stanley Sr. in Chicago?
I think that you ought to look at the marriage records for Holy Cross. If they were married in the church, that would have been Holy Cross, which was the Lithuanian church, Catholic church in Chicago. I'm going to go try and see if there's a divorce record.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll see you shortly. Thank you. So while Hillary calls the Cook County Clerk's office to see if there's a divorce record on file, I'm asking the library's archivist to pull microfilm records for Holy Cross Church in 1914, the year that my great-grandparents were married. Emma and Stanley's marriage record hopefully will give me some more information on Stanley Sr., which could then help me find out if these two Stanleys are actually, really the same guy. Sedakus and Bielskis, Philium, Joseph, and Mariana Gesheta are my great-great-grandparents. My father's middle name, that's what he went by, was Daniel Joseph Sudeikis. Interesting. I don't think my father would know that Joseph was the family name, especially if it came from the Sudeikis side. But it suits him better than Marianne. Daniel Marianne Sedakus. That's not horrible.
Hi.
Hi.
So you found the document?
Yeah, we found it right here.
I heard back from the county clerk's office.
Right.
There is no record of a divorce.
Okay. Then what I have to find out now, if the Stanley that we have the marriage record of here is the same Stanley that's also married with a family in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Yep.
All right. So I'm on my way to Connecticut to pull whatever records or documents I can find for the Bridgeport Stanley Sedakus and compare them against the Chicago Stanley Sedakus. I'm extremely interested to find out where this trend of men being raised without fathers actually started. So I'm meeting with Dr. Bob Rafford, a genealogist who I hope can help me straighten this out.
Since you indicated that you found a 1920 census record showing that Stanley Sedakus Sr. was married, why don't we look in these books to see if we can find a marriage record for him here in Bridgeport? Why don't you start with the 1918 records?
Okay.
I'll take the records from 1919. We'll see if we can find a record there that'll be helpful.
All right.
Each one of these books has an index in the front.
Here we go. Stanley Sedakus, 298. This is 1918. All right. We got town of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Groom's name, Stanley Sedakus. Bride's name, Amalia Jackitis.
Looks like Tracheitis.
Tracheitis. Birthplace, Lithuania. Listed as his first marriage. Then it's not him. Or he's lying. Name of father, Joseph. Well, the father's name is correct. It was Joseph.
Name of mother is Mary Gash.
That's not the name I remember from the marriage record. We had the names Joseph and Mary Gesheta.
Mary Gesheta. Mary Gash may be an anglicized version of her name.
So wait a minute. Joseph and Mary?
Joseph and Mary.
Are you trying to tell me that I'm related to Jesus? That's his signature there. Well, I do have a marriage application from Chicago with the signature. The T into A to the N, very, very similar.
I think there's enough similarity between these two signatures to think that these are one and the same men.
Yeah, certainly the information all, makes sense, aside from him living in Chicago and being married to my great-grandmother. That's the only information that's drastically different. But yeah, bigamy feels a little bit, a little odd. I I don't know what to make of it. I would hope that it was a mutual decision. I'd hate to think that he just hightailed it out of Chicago. So then, how do we find out more about, you know, what these young kids ended up doing?
Why don't we go to the 1930 census for Bridgeport and see what kind of information that holds about Stanley and his family?
Yeah.
So let's go to Ancestry.com.
So this is 1930. I've looked at the 1921. So here we are in, is that Greenfield Hill?
Greenfield Hill.
Oops.
That would be the next town over from
Gotcha.
Bridgeport.
So we have Stanley Sedakus, Amelia, wife, and then daughter. We have a daughter named Julia.
Daughter named Julia.
They own
This was a $4,600 house that they own.
Stanley they had listed as a gardener at a private estate. So they were owning property and doing just fine with him gardening.
It said a lot that he was able to afford a house in that area.
Mm-hmm. So he was conducting himself in a, we can assume, in a gentlemanly fashion. They probably don't know about the family in Chicago.
They probably don't.
Yeah.
No.
You would think Stanley Sr. would have as much concern for his son and wife in Chicago as you would hope, as he would his wife and daughter here in Connecticut. It certainly allows myself to be a little bit more understanding for why my grandfather, Stanley Jr., would have left my grandmother and my own father. If he didn't know life with a father, then he may not have realized the importance of that role. Not having a father, I don't think necessarily you lose a childhood. I would assume you just get a different one. Maybe one that's not as responsibility-free. Maybe one that caused a little distrust in family. I know of a great deal many people that have made their way through it and gone on to do, you know, amazing things. Some maybe more notable than my father, but no more impressive. My father broke a cycle. I appreciate it greatly. Knowing my great-grandfather, Stanley Sr., left my grandfather to start a second family really makes me wonder about Stanley Sr.'s relationship with his own father. You know, does this pattern of abandonment continue to back to a third generation? So I'm returning to my hotel to research my family's roots, starting with their immigration from Lithuania to the United States. I have New York passenger lists, 1820 to 1957. Click on that. And now Stanley Sedakus, Lithuania. Looks like August 25th, 1900, Stanislaw, AKA Stanley Sr., 8 years old. Looks like he was traveling with Mariana Sudeikis, who was 16, so I'm going to assume his sister. Whether going to join a relative, if so, what relative? Father Joseph. So Joseph must have traveled ahead and brought his family once he'd gotten settled. So then to know if Stanley Sr. actually did meet up with him, I guess we could check the census, see if he's listed with his father in 1900. All right, so Joseph Sudeikis, head of the household. Underneath that, Mary, listed as wife. Oh boy, how many kids we got here? 8, holy moly. Slasia. I went with one of those hippie names for the little girl. Wait a minute, we have no Stanley listed. Maybe he wasn't there yet? Okay, so this was June 11th of 1900. The passenger list that I looked at is actually from August, so that's why Stanley Sr. would not be listed as a family member yet. This was in Mahanoy Township in Pennsylvania. So Joseph, they had listed as a coal miner. My great-great-grandfather being a coal miner. I know nothing about that world. So in order to find out a little bit more about Joseph, I would need to go to Pennsylvania, miner country.
Jason Sudeikis just arrived in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to investigate his great-great-grandfather's life in mining country.
The census from 1900 showed that Joseph was a coal miner in Mahanoy Township. So I'm hoping that learning about his work will give me a real sense of what kind of man he actually was. I'm meeting with historian Stu Richards, an expert in coal mining, during the time that Joseph worked. Well, I had just found out that my great-great-grandfather, Joseph Sudeikis, had come over from Lithuania to Pennsylvania to work in the coal mines.
Men, like your great-great-grandfather, would have left by himself and arrived here in, the anthracite region looking for work.
Oh, would they leave Lithuania going, we're on our way to Pennsylvania, America?
It depends. A lot of times the coal barons had recruiters that they sent to Europe looking for strong people, because coal mining is an extremely hard type of job, probably the hardest job that at the time period he could make a living for himself, and at one point he could bring his family over bit by bit.
In the 1880s, America's coal industry was booming, fueled by the Industrial Revolution. Near the turn of the 20th century, recruiters lured thousands of Eastern Europeans to the US as a source of cheap labor. While Lithuanians like Joseph came to escape economic hardship and political oppression at home, work in the coal mines was backbreaking and dangerous. Men and boys worked 6 days a week, 12 hours a day in the grim confines of the mines. Accidents were commonplace, rescue difficult, and many died underground.
Do you know where Joseph might have worked?
There were 2 or 3 big collieries in the Monoi area that he could have possibly worked at. And we can go look through the U.S. Mine Safety and Health Administration website.
All right.
Up here in the search engine there, you can put in Monoi.
His job was listed as coal miner. When I saw the 1900 census, oh, here you go. November 9th, 1900, Monoi City, Pennsylvania. 7 died in an explosion. That's the only thing listed for that city. Wondering if any of those 7 people that died in that might have shared my same last name. Well, how do you find out?
I can go back to the archives and I'll see what I can find for you.
Great. It's a dangerous job in so many different ways. Being burned to death or hurled from a cart.
Well, we found a
Holy
couple
moly.
of things here.
Look at this.
I brought out the coroner's report for that time period.
Start in the middle. I jumped to 1901.
Yeah, 1901.
Here's November.
Well, you hit it right.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Joseph Sudeikis. So what is, okay, name of the deceased. Explosion of gas. To know it for certain that he died, when Stanley Sr. was very young. I mean, you could say that he didn't know him at all, really.
It's an extremely difficult lifestyle for people at that time period.
How did anybody make it through?
The best thing that I think we can do is I can take you down into a mine that was operating at the same time, and show you exactly what happened and where he would have been working in the exact type of environment. Okay,
well,
let's go.
Let's do it. I think it's incredibly sad that my great-great-grandfather died in a coal mine while trying to make a better life for his family. I'm hoping to get a better understanding of what Joseph faced in the days and ultimately the minutes right before his untimely death. You're going to put me 400, 500 feet underground?
Yes, inside, about a quarter mile inside the mountain. It would have been this dark, basically, without with our headlamps. It's making it a little bit more modern lighting, but at the time, the whole environment would be this way. Now, the problem is, we have a lot of light here. We're working with these lamps here.
Yeah.
This is exactly what your great-grandfather would have worn. This hat, this is an original old miner's hat. We can't light it here in the mine for safety reasons, but this was a little lamp, and it just burned. So it has a flame about that high on it when it is burning. And this is what creates the problem. November 9th, what happened was Joseph, we could say, was working up here in this chute.
Sure.
A fellow by the name of Gallagher.
Yeah.
He goes to the chute down there, which was closed off. He went without permission with a naked lamp. He stuck his head right into a pocket of gas.
Boom.
A horrendous explosion, beyond belief, came roaring down through every orifice in the mine.
It's like you're inside the bomb.
Yeah. it would have been horrendous. To hurl men
Left and
20,
right,
30
yeah.
feet away, it had to be a tremendous explosion. And then that gas, the ball of fire is completely encased in this general area
And this kind of stuff happened.
on a regular basis.
I can't imagine suffering this much in this job while alive, much less dying from it.
Any miner that goes underground puts his life in the hands of his skill and Mother Nature.
Yeah.
And it's very, very tough.
The way the story is unfolded to me is that my grandfather, who passed away when my father was, 2, died homeless. He didn't pay child support at all because he refused to work. So then to think that Joseph, who did above and beyond, stayed with the family, forged ahead into this new world to make a better life, just wasn't around long enough to prove that example, one could say, because it broke down here. It is a nice little gesture that my father, Daniel Joseph Sudeikis, shares his middle name with his great-grandfather, because I feel that they both lived their lives seemingly family first. I was thinking of the irony that is the difference of work ethics between Joseph and Stanley Jr. And I do like to think that Joseph would have given his grandson a great deal of for refusing to work.
Jason Sudeikis has traveled back to his hometown in Kansas. Jason's father, Dan, was only an infant when his father, Stanley, abandoned the family.
I'm very excited to speak to my father, if for no other reason than I know he's excited.
Maybe.
Hello.
There he is.
Guys.
Hi, honey.
How you doing?
You look handsome.
Thank you. You look like Prince.
Hey, you look good, buddy.
See you.
Yes, indeed.
Nice.
Sister hug.
Oh, one of these. One-stop shopping.
One-stop shop.
How fun.
Yes.
How you guys doing?
We've been out here talking.
Yeah.
Start at the beginning. Where'd you go? You went to Chicago.
I went to Chicago first, yeah, and found out that Stanley had never met you.
Me.
Never met you. You never met him.
Oh.
He never met you. He never paid an ounce of child support.
Yeah.
He missed out.
He refused to work, is what was said by those that testified.
Wow.
What we can pretty much assume is that, he drank a lot, and it killed him to a degree. I mean, he died, penniless, homeless, and familyless at 32 years old.
Oh, wow.
Separated, homeless,
Wow. You believe it?
ostracized, from his closest family. I feel it is a form of closure, this journey, to relay the information to my dad. I mean, I guess I like to think it would provide him with peace of mind or an understanding or a certain completion towards his own life. Stanley Sr. refused to live with his family. And then you're like, well, God, what caused that? Not understanding the power of family. And then you get to Joseph, and Joseph not only provided for his family, but died while working.
Yeah.
Quite the opposite of the other two.
So then Jason is the first Sudeikis son to have his father here.
Yes, I'm certainly proud and very fortunate to have had my father. He allowed for all 4 of the people in his immediate family to live a life that allowed them to be excellent. And I think that's really, really amazing. You learned parenting on the fly, at least fathering.
Yeah.
You've taken a lot of time over these last 10 years to sort of like apologizing to me, thinking you didn't do enough or were too hard here. Yeah. And I just, I don't think you need to do that ever again.
Thank you. That's
Well,
good.
touching. My
I
gosh.
think you should just,
That's very nice to hear. Thank you.
look at us as your trophy family towards a life well lived. The pressure that I feel now with the notion of being raised so well by such a great dad will be destroyed by the pressure I feel once there really is a child to take care of. None as of yet, but I look forward to the stress, if only because I know that the effort you put into it is incredibly rewarding.